Many people who are highly sensitive also experience an attachment trauma. An attachment injury or trauma is when we're not properly mirrored or understood or connected to emotionally as children. You guys probably watch my videos, so you see that a lot of my work revolves around emotional validation. When we're highly sensitive and misunderstood, a lot of us get an attachment trauma. Sometimes there's an attachment trauma, and that creates high sensitivity by being super hypervigilant around your surroundings or the people in your environment to find that attachment, to find that love, to have a sense of self. What this does is it greatly affects our relationships later in life. If you have a relationship and you notice it's not going the way that you thought, or there's always some drama, or there's some strange dynamics that don't feel right for you, or you have a lot of anxiety or insecurity about things, watch this video. You guys know I'm always talking about emotional wounds, the emotional pain body, healing by feeling. And what I want to say is there's a name for a lot of this emotional trauma that people carry around into their relationships and almost become what I like to call a love addiction or a relationship addiction, where your relationships are just constantly stressful or dysfunctional or different than you think they should be. You suffer a lot with anxiety. You suffer a lot with almost an attachment to the person you're in a relationship with. And when you're not in a relationship, you don't have those issues because you're not in an attachment situation. So relationships can bring up a lot for people. For that reason, I want to discuss attachment trauma. Attachment trauma is the name that I would now give to a lot of the things I talk about, a lot of the emotional invalidation when you grow up, and it may just be a slight thing. So attachment trauma can be little or large. It can be as little as mommy or daddy didn't pick you up from school and you're waiting for an hour. That's traumatic, to I was abused. So there are many different levels of attachment trauma. However, it's very important to realize that whatever level, it affects you greatly in an emotional way, in your emotional body. My way of healing people who have attachment issues or attachment trauma is by going inward. A lot of therapists and coaches like to talk about either the mental realm or the physical realm, but I really go into the emotional realm because I really truly feel like we need to heal something from the place that it began. And attachment trauma is all about emotional trauma, emotional validation, a disconnect, insecure sort of relationship, ambivalent relationship between you and one or both caregivers. There could have been an event that happened that made you feel all of a sudden that close, safe connection was broken or traumatized or shifting. I can go into many, many stories. For me, in my personal life, I experienced an attachment trauma at 18 months old. And I remembered that trauma when I was 15 years old, having a reoccurrence of that type of trauma. So they are in our bodies. They stay in our bodies until we follow that pain to the source. What was it? What is it that happened at 18 months old or 2 years old or 3 years old? What was that? And so we can follow our pain back to the place that it started. So whether you had an attachment trauma and that caused you to become highly sensitive, or you're highly sensitive and because of that you were greatly affected by attachment trauma, either way, it's affecting your relationships. See, the thing is, unless we're in a relationship, we're not having attachment triggers come up. So a lot of people that have gone through attachment trauma or have attachment issues aren't in relationships, decide they don't want to be because it's easier. There's more of an isolating thing going on. But a lot of people who find themselves in attachment trauma, in relationships, find themselves in sort of a love addiction or relationship addiction. So here's the thing. If you're walking around and you're feeling like your relationships are crazy, like there are some things that you're really sensitive about, you're insecure, you get anxious, you start obsessing about someone, you feel almost like you're gonna die if this connection breaks, Or even if this person is unhealthy and abusive or an addict or something, you still feel like your heart is yearning for this person. This is one of the biggest, in my opinion, let's say symptoms of what I would call love addiction or codependency. A lot of people I work with come to me because they're having a lot of trouble in their relationships and they think they're highly sensitive or they are highly sensitive. And what I find so often is there is an attachment injury with one or both parents. They didn't feel understood, they didn't feel seen, they didn't feel like they even existed sometimes. You don't feel like people get you. You don't feel connected. And so what you're doing, that inner part of you, that inner child, that wounded child, is trying desperately to get that connection and that attachment with someone else. This is a huge thing for highly sensitive people specifically, because highly sensitive people are the ones who often feel some shame about who they are because they're misunderstood, they feel different, they didn't fully fit into their family. This is a big thing for us. Relationships are a big deal because your relationship is where you're supposed to feel safe. It's like you're creating your own family. But when you didn't come from a place that felt super validating and healthy, you're not really going to be able to recreate that from a really healthy, whole place. You got to do the inner work first. You got to heal these wounds to the wisdom that you need to create a beautiful, fulfilling, harmonious relationship. So what this looks like is really getting in tune with your own emotion. As a highly sensitive person, you probably are in tune. However, you're probably also in tune with a lot of other people's emotion. And so boundaries are big for you. The other thing that's important to realize is that this is not something mental. This is not that you can say, oh, stop thinking that way, or stop thinking about him or her, or stop obsessing, or stop needing so much, or stop watching everything they do, or stop searching for the text, or stop, creating these push-pull dynamics. It's not something you can control. It's something that's coming through you through an emotional wound. It's an emotional body happening without your ability. It's to change it mentally. It's a trauma. So the way that we go into trauma, in my opinion, which is based in shame, there's something wrong with me, right? I'm unlovable. I don't have this connection. I don't have this attachment that's healthy. It must be because of me. Because as young kids, we say everything's about me, so I have a sense of control. You realize later it's not because of you, and that's really painful to process that and realize, okay, I was a victim to this circumstance, but now I can take my power back and change it. But the way we take our power back, as you guys know, I say it all the time, you got to feel it to heal it. The only way to get rid of, heal this shame of there's something wrong with me, and that's why I keep creating these weird patterns in my relationships to validate that, right? The only way to heal that is to go into it, to get really into me, I see, intimacy, really intimate with your pain, with your shame. When you can look at it and say, I'm not going to let this engulf me, but instead, I'm this beautiful person that has a lot of friends, there's a lot going on, my career's great, everything's wonderful. Take the good things from your life. Realize that's who you are. You're going to upgrade your story and say, I see this pain. This isn't me. I'm not going to identify with this anymore. What I'm going to do is say that this is pain, this is a wound inside of me that I need to upgrade into the new story. I need to see this wound and see that I've been running from it, denying it, trying to cover it with a relationship, trying to cover it with making it someone else's problem. This shit isn't going anywhere. It's going to be here until I upgrade it and integrate it into who I truly am, which is my new story, which is the story you should have always had. But you didn't get to have it because you had an attachment trauma. So you're going to look at this pain and you're going to say, tell me about it. Tell me about what's so scary about you. Tell me about what's so unlovable about you. What are my beliefs about my unlovability? What are my beliefs about my unworthiness? What are my beliefs about why this has happened to me? Because every one of us has a story of why we were unloved. What is it about me that I can change? I'm going to hold on to that. I'm going to control it. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to pick a partner who's going to make me feel good because they're so great. And then I can latch on to their identity, whatever it is. This cycle of love addiction happens where you're looking to someone else to validate that part of you that never got validated, the emotional connection, the emotional positive attachment. This is going to continue until you positively attach to your true self. When you positively can say, I'm no longer going to keep this shame in the dark. I'm no longer going to run from it. I'm no longer going to be afraid of what I feel. I'm no longer going to do whatever I can to not feel it. In all these relationships, I'm going to stop. I'm going to look at my stuff. I'm going to say, what am I really afraid of? What about me made me unworthy of an attachment to my mom or dad? And then when you can really look at what happened and why, you can see, because this is everybody, it was never about you. It was never about you. Even if you were told it was about you, you're not good enough, you're unworthy, you're weird, you're different, I don't get you. It says more about them, doesn't it? It says more about them. So now you can look at that and say, okay, my external authority, in the form of a lot of relationships probably, has been constantly telling me that there is something wrong with me, and that's why I'm unlovable. But when you can really look at it and say, what do I really see is wrong? Because this is what happens. I'm not being attached to, I'm not being emotionally validated, I'm not being connected to, I'm not feeling consistent connection in my own community, in my own family, in my own surroundings. It must be me. When you really look and see what happened, was it something that happened when you were a baby? Was it something where one of your parents was divorcing the other parent was emotionally gone, and so you felt that? What really was it? And we can't really see it when we're running from the emotion that's trying to show us something. So you got to go into it. You got to feel it so you can heal it. You got to get real about what you feel. Am I feeling shame? Am I feeling embarrassment? Am I feeling insecurity? Am I feeling what? What am I feeling? What have these relationships been validating? What have these relationships been mirroring to me that's still in me that I'm not looking at? What is this addiction to being loved? Once we realize that our heart is in deep need of intimacy with our own selves, we can start to do that work. We can start to look within. We can start to self-heal and realize that our relationships are never going to heal us. They're only going to reflect to us what we can heal within ourselves. So, you guys, don't forget to check the links below to all my e-courses, my Instagram. I'm always on there doing some inspiring quotes of some sort. And please share and subscribe. I'll see you next week. Namaste.